What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about The Thousandfold Thought by R. Scott Bakker. So this is going to be a Let's Talk video. For those that don't know, these things are filled to the brim with spoilers. They're really designed for fans of the series, people that love to spoil shit for themselves, as well as built for myself to get all this shit out of my head and into a video. So if you're looking for the spoiler-free review, I will put a link in the description. So for those that are hardcore, know that this is not necessarily a deep dive. This is just me getting stuff out of my head. I will try to cover as much as I can, as accurate as I can. But this is really, like I said, guys, this is a Let's Talk video. So calling out all of you hardcores and the Bakker Pac-Mans, go feel free to light up these comments, you know what I mean? And if I get something wrong, you know what I mean, correct me. I'm not so arrogant that I gotta be right. All right, let's get into it. So one of the first things I want to jump into is the shared dream of the school mandate that we kind of get hit with almost right out the gate. Now we see a commune has decided to contact his school, and he reaches not Sarah, but this description we're getting, we get that the wall of the dead, and people are nailed, and it's just a very grim and dark scene, and but this whole thing drops a lot on us, right? I mean, this is when we start to get that whole thing with the non-man McCarratrig. And we start to kind of understand too that because they're immortal and just how marked they are by sorcery, literally just being in the vicinity of a core ray can destroy some of these guys. I mean, that's just a lot to take in. Plus, I mean, come on, the non-man are kind of a question mark, right? So it's we're getting hit with a lot of information right now, I felt like. But you also get this feel of the madness of the non-man, right? Because they've been around for so long, they've suffered so much. They're insane, basically. They are ran by madness at this point, and we're seeing this whole gruesome scene, right? And not Sarah and everything play out. But we see that whole questioning of the non-man to Seswatha, and it seems like he's trying to figure out where this heron spear is, and I feel like that's the first mention that we got of that. And so it was kind of whoa, what the fuck is going on? And then we get the actual back and forth with a commune and not Sarah, and he finally tells him about Kellis and all this stuff. And it's a kind of a funny back and forth because this is the first time we see not Sarah seem to be actually concerned and kind of backing a commune, but at the same time it's not a great conversation because when a commune walks away from it, right, he's basically been told by his school that he needs to kind of play ball with the Scarlet Spires, the people that just tortured him and fucked his friend up, so it's he's got to keep up this ruse. And as well as there's this whole thing going on with a commune getting ready to teach Kellis the gnosis. Then we get that back and forth between a commune and Kellis, right? And we're watching Kellis's rise to the warrior prophet. He's definitely amazed everybody, a commune included, and to the point where a commune is suffering, just to be around Kellis, really, because technically Kellis stole the commune's wife. And a commune is so all about Kellis in this moment that he really even sees this whole pain that he's suffering over Esmenet as his trial. And that's kind of that's crazy, you know what I mean? That's just how bought and sold everybody is with Kellis at this point. Now we also see that Kellis decides to move a commune in with him, and we'll watch a commune packing his stuff up where he was staying with Zynemus, and we'll get that whole deal with Zynemus and Proyas, which was when I read this part, it was a kind of one of those shocker moments, because it's when Zynemus says the warrior prophet can't heal. Then we pick up with Nayor, and there's this whole scene, right, where he breaks into baby Moengus's nursery. Moengus grabs his finger. There's that moment, and honestly, guys, I know there's probably plenty of you that were it's plain as day that Moengus is Nayor's son. But it was really until this moment that it really clicked with me because, yes, he's got the dark hair, whatever. But, honestly, I was back and forth. I was like, dude, I don't know if it's literally, Kellis or Nayor's son. Who knows? But in this moment, I felt like it was Bakker kind of putting the nail in the coffin there, being like, yeah, Mo Angus is Nayor's son. And we get that, we're really feeling Nayor's madness. We get the back and forth between, Nayor and Esmenet because of what, Nayor is just thinking about what to do with Mo Angus. And it's just it's a crazy situation, right? And this is why I kind of love this book so much. It was a lot coming at me, and it's like, I wish it would have been longer, but the thing is like, man, it was just the buildup of all this stuff coming at you at a rapid rate. It's amazing. And then we work our way up to that scene where we're really watching the men of the Tusk, the Orthodox men of the Tusk, basically convert, and they're becoming the Zundunyani, I believe is, wow, bear with me, guys. So we're watching the men of the Tusk, they're throwing themselves at Kellis. They're laying the flags of their enemy at his feet. And we watch as that, rubs Confus the wrong way, and he tries to call Kellis out, and Kellis exposes Akiri Confus. He exposes the Nansur Empire and their plans to pervert the Holy War in the end. So essentially this lames Akiri Confus and the remnants of his army. And he, Kellis knows that he can't just outright kill Akiri in front of everybody. So he sends him to Joktha. He basically sends him to Joktha with his army. They're to remain there unarmed and await transport ships back to the Nansur Empire. Then we also get those scenes with Nayor, right, where he's kind of come in contact with somebody else, We see the Inkoroi and basically contact Nayor, right? And there's that madness being played out and whatnot. But this is kind of like the beginning of a new relationship, and one that really was responsible for changing my, perspective on the Inkoroi. But we get that little bit, and then we also get that section with Proyas, right? Proyas is obviously, Proyas has had one hell of a journey here, and I feel like his has been a test of faith, one after the other, and he's kind of dealing with himself and feeling like a sinner in his own ways, and just in how he condemned Kellis, the warrior prophet. And we watch as Kellis kind of baptizes him, kind of forgives him of his sins, and but we also get to see that Proyas gets sent to Nayor to deliver the message that he is to kill, Akiri Confus. He's not just sent over to Joktha to oversee the whole thing. He's sent there basically as an assassin. Now, I'm just going to kind of jump into the whole Joktha part, but I guess before going into that, we'll also just talk real quick about how we know that Zarias is dead. At least that's what we, believe to be, right? Because we get that whole scene with Zarias, his mother being a skin spy, him running for his life, and it just kind of getting cut short, in mid sentence or whatever. So, one could, put two and two together and figure out, Zarias is dead. And so then we move on to Joktha, right? And this part is amazing because there are characters that have amazing chemistry, for positive reasons. And then there are characters that have chemistry for negative reasons. And, Akiri Confus and Nayor Sciotha have that kind of enemy chemistry that is just so much fun to watch play out. One of the things I really found interesting when we move into this whole, Joktha part of the book was really in the Men of the Tusk, because this is where we see that we are really watching the Holy War change quite a bit. And like I said in my spoiler-free review, they're starting to resemble the heathen more than themselves. And in Joktha, I really you get that feel because you're seeing men of the Tusk who have marked themselves with Swazan scars. You know what I mean? They basically have, heralded the Skilvendi as one of their own and heroes, here in this holy war. He's respected by them. You know what I mean? They find him almost as a brother. And that was like, that's really interesting. You know what I mean? And you can kind of like gloss over that, I think, but I feel like that's important to see like these kinds of changes in the Holy War and among the men of the Tusk. Now, here in Joktha, we get that beautiful back and forth between Confus and Nayor. Like, when it starts out, Nayor is basically on top, and Confus is disarmed. And, it's funny to see Confus kind of at the heel of the heathen. But we're also watching Nayor not follow through with his orders to assassinate Akiri Confus. And that's interesting, right? We kind of find out it's just because Nayor doesn't want to do what Kellis tells him to do. But then we are also getting those, the Synthes bird is chirping in Nayor's ear. And that was kind of interesting, right? Because this is where I saw the consult and Kellis's kind of, they're like, their shit was aligning, right? They both wanted him to kill Confus, and I was like, what is going on? Then we get the whole deal. Confus finds out he's the new emperor. He makes his escape, and then he comes back, right? Like, to fight. And this is amazing. I really liked Joktha, the battle in Joktha between, the men of the Tusk and Nayor versus, the new emperor of the Nansur Empire, basically. And it is a bloody ass battle. And there's that. I'm pretty sure this is the one where there's that mention that Nayor will run out of space on his arms for the swaths and scars for the lives that he takes, But even going into that, before they really go to battle, that like little, that speech that Nayor gives to the men of the Tusk is, only one that Nayor could give. It's so inspiring, where he's just like, I don't know your gods or your afterlife, you know what I mean? And he's just like, but, women and children or what will be crying in the Nansur Empire for all the lives I'm about to take. It's just so classic Nayor, and man, I was pumped. And Joktha was a bloody masterpiece. But of course, we know that Nayor doesn't exactly win this battle. Now we get this moment where we got Akiri Confus, and he has Nayor as basically his prisoner. He's tied up, he's beaten down, and Confus is talking to him, right? And he lets loose this little bit, right? And it had me kind of going, oh my God, is this going to happen? Because he's like, I was even thinking of making you my exalt general. And I literally wasn't sure if we were going to see Akiri Confus, Nayor Sciotha, working side by side. For a minute, I was like, holy shit. But of course, it couldn't work out. Their chemistry, it just works too much against one another. So... So it's great, though. That whole thing plays out awesome. But then we see, when Akiri Confus storms out, we see that Sampus, Akiri Confus's general, come in. But it's not Sampus, right? It's a fucking skin spy, and he cuts Nayor loose. Gives him his core, and boom, Nayor is on the loose. And the hunt is on. Now I kind of want to pop back towards the Holy War as we're going to go, whoop, little rewind, and we're pushing forward with the rest of the crew, right? And maybe I'll fast forward a bit here, because I really want to just jump into some stuff, because I want to talk about the part where we get Esmenet reading the sagas, because this gave me a lot of insight, though it did confuse me too, and I had to read this a couple times. But this is where we understand that the Inkoroi crash landed, essentially, right? Like way back in the day, in non-man land, and just all that ensues there. We start to understand the history of this world. That there has been a history that has been basically almost forgotten, and a history was built upon that, and it really, this thing has already been gigantic and massive, but the sagas bring like an even bigger, epic, massive scale to that already massive scale. If that makes sense. But yes, the sagas were kind of confusing, but they're also very like enlightening, right? Like we are getting a lot of answers to these crazy questions that we've been cooking up along the way. But you know what? Bakker definitely seems to be all about cause and effect. And if you could say, the answer is the cause, well, the effect is only more questions. So, like I said, we are getting answers, but some of those answers just come with more questions, and we certainly still have stuff that hasn't been touched on yet. So, as much as I'm was very excited, I'm still very like, oh, what's going on? And we get the stuff with between Kellis and Akamian, where Akamian is teaching him the Gnosis, and that was kind of cool because it enlightens us a little bit more about just like the in and outs of sorcery. But I also want to go into something that kind of confused me, I guess, a little bit as well. When, Kellis and Akamian are talking to each other, and Kellis is kind of talking to him about, like, the god, the original people, or at least the original language. And from what I can kind of understand, it's something, and I, like, please, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that, like, sorcery, the language of sorcery is like closer to the original language of the god, maybe, then, you know what I mean? It's not such a heathen thing. Like, it's more connected with the god than it isn't, you know what I mean? And that all this, like, talk of blasphemy and sorcery is kind of crazy and bullshit. Now, I also want to jump into this dream of Akamian's, the Seswatha dream, right? Because we're getting a new glimpse, and it's that whole like journey of Seswatha, and now Coyote, and that one was kind of confusing, but it's also enlightening at the same time, right? Because we're seeing this, like, we're seeing that whole thing with the Inkoroi, but at the same time, it's like it's kind of confusing because it's like broken up, and you don't know exactly what Seswatha is lying to now Coyote about, and you finally kind of put it together that it's like he told him a lie about, like, his wife is in here, but they're really, like, they went into Golgotharoth to, like, find the Heron spear, and that kind of makes that connection in the beginning where Mercaritrig was, like, questioning Seswatha about this spear. But once again, like I said, this created a lot of questions for me. And it confused the shit out of me. I had to read this one like several times as well. But once again, I feel like it gave me a lot of like answers to certain things, like at least a better understanding, especially of the Inkoroi. And speaking of the Inkoroi, let's pop back to Nayor. I know I'm popping all over the place, guys, but so when we pick back up with Nayor, that he's with these skin spies, and they're basically kind of on the run from Sompus, who's been, assigned by Confis to go track him down before they can reach the Holy War. But we get this whole different perspective, right? A whole different side to the Inkoroi and these skin spies. Just through the dialogue and the back and forth between the skin spy Surway and Nayor. But then especially, when Sompus, his crew, like, rolls up on him, and we see the Surway skin spy basically, protect Nayor by fucking throwing herself in front of all the arrows. That's a huge, heavy moment, right? Because, like I said, I'm not saying it makes the Inkoroi good people, but they certainly have a side to tell as well, right? In this story, they're not just like the sinister black smudge on the book. They're people too. Going back to the Holy War with Akamian, Kellis, Esmenet, and the rest of the crew, as we push forward here, I'll just jump into this whole scene, right? Like, when we know, like, when Zynemus died, that was a big thing. That was a big thing for both Proyas and Akamian, as well as Esmenet, even though she didn't attend the funeral. But that created a big, like, I feel like that was one of the big rifts that began with Akamian. But then we'll move in and we add to that, like, fuel to that fire, right? Because we watch Akamian when he is gonna be, like, he's set up to be killed by the Inkoroi, like an assassination attempt. And we see that whole thing play out where Esmenet is, possessed, And that whole deal going back and forth with Kellis was pretty ridiculously like just sinister. But moving with the Kamian, when he wakes up to Nayor with the fucking Kore, this whole back and forth was amazing. It's hard hitting, and it's really, I feel like, pivotal, right? Because Akamian's going to have that huge change, and I feel like this is like, Zanimus was one thing, and then I think this conversation with Nayor was huge, right? Because, and especially when we get to that point where Nayor tells Akamian, he's like, "Tell yourself, sorcerer, like, what do you have that he has not taken yet?" Then I think the final thing for Akamian is just when he's able to kind of try to take his wife back from Kellis. Like, because he definitely takes, Esmenet, they sleep together. That whole thing, I feel like that's just that last rift, right? Like, that's that last piece of Akamian kind of melting away, and he will be different from here. In fact, he even begins to dream different. We'll see, like, there at the very end. But yeah, very interesting stuff, because I feel like it's a series of events have happened because Kamian was completely enamored with Kellis, completely bought and sold. But through a series of events, we see like just one little like chink in the armor after another until like the truth is bare, and Kamian kind of sees the truth, right? Now, before I really get into the assault on Shimeh, I guess I just want to go cover the Moangus like Kellis part, right? Because we know like before the assault on Shimeh, like Kellis separates himself. He goes to find his father. That's his real mission here, right? And he finds his father, and what plays out from there is once again, this was another part that's pretty confusing. Kind of read a couple times. I think I understand it, but also at the same time, I'm not sure. Maybe it is a little bit up for interpretation. This is where I would love to hear from you hardcores and Bakker Pac-Mans, because, like, okay, the Thousandfold Thought, right? From what I understand, it seems like the Thousandfold Thought is almost just like predicting the future, like through the probability trance. Like, whoever can stay in the probability trance longer can see further into the future, maybe, is kind of what it seems like. The reason why I'm kind of like gathering this assumption is because we see Moangus and Kellis talking to one another, and we find out that Moangus has planned everything. Everything that has happened basically was like planned or perceived by Moangus. We know about, and we find out about Mathanet, Oh, man, we find out that that's Kellis' half-brother. But all these steps, all these measures, everything that happened and everything that Kellis chose to do, Moangus knew would happen. But there's that one thing that he didn't call for, and it's like when he, finds out that Kellis is speaking, or hearing voices, that's like this whole thing plays out. It's like, oh, he's I didn't know my son would come to me mad. And this is like where it kind of gets confusing, because I'm like, wait a minute, is Kellis mad? Or is Moangus mad? Are they both fucking mad? It's really tough to kind of figure it out, because they're both Dunyain, and they're both like analyzing and like fucking doing their thing on one another. And so they both, like I said, I've always, said that Kellis is intriguing. And one of the reasons why I find him intriguing is because I never really can figure him out completely. I know some people are like, oh, it's so obvious. But to me, it's very confusing. And now you have two of those kinds of people in the same room talking to each other. But yes, from like how it plays out is amazing, right? Because essentially we see that like Kellis is kind of bought into like himself being more. And that's where I was like, man, is he crazy? And this whole thing with the like rings, the golden rings around his hands, I'm like, fuck, did the people that see those, like, are they mad too? And then it made me wonder, like, did everybody go mad at Mengeta? Like the plains, when they walked the plains where the no god, like, did everybody go crazy in their own way? I don't know. But like, that's what I'm saying. Like, all this shit starts kicking up in my head, and I'm like, so I had to read it a whole bunch of times, and I'm still, not so sure I know exactly what's going down, but I do know that, Kellis stabs his dad and basically teleports away, right? I mean, they know that Nayor and the Nkoroi are coming, but, Kellis, like, completes his mission, right? Like the Dunyan sent him to kill Moangus, but in a way I thought that maybe he wouldn't. But then you kind of understand, it's like Kellis makes the connection that, Moangus will only become just like the Incorroy. He'll just constantly try to break everything down, make his, calculations one way or another. That's like the route that Moangus will ultimately take. So Kellis stabs him, teleports away. And then we work our way into what I felt like was one of the most heartbreaking parts of this trilogy. And that's that part where, we see Moangus and Nayor together. And it's just a very emotionally charged moment, because this is a guy, Nayor has been trying to find Moangus. He wants to kill him, but he also loves him. You know what I mean? There's this weird fucked up cycle there of love and hate, and he freed him, he showed him something else, and Nayor has spent the rest of his life trying to zig in that opposite direction and become the most violent man because he loved, really, and we see Moangus calling him Nayu, and it very quickly becomes this close moment between the two, and you're almost kind of not sure what's going to happen. But at that last minute there, Nayor takes his Kore and fucking smokes Moangus, and it's dude, I choked up. I could feel my chest tightening and stuff. It was that kind of a moment for me. But of course, I'm very attached to Nayor as his character. I had been since The Darkness That Comes Before. And this moment to me was something I was looking forward to probably more than Kellis and Moangus. If I'm being honest, this was the moment, the meeting that I was anticipating since I really met Nayor. And I don't think that Bakker let me down one bit. It is sad and it is heartbreaking, but it is so emotionally charged and well done, well constructed. You know what I mean? The handling of that moment is just, it's fucking good. I get a little emotional just talking about it. All right, enough of the sappy shit. Okay, so let's get into Shimeh, right? This is the craziest assault. There's magic and mayhem galore, right? And we see, the Scarlet Spires come in and they're just lighting the place up. They're fucking shit up. And we as the reader are almost getting that idea. It's man, this almost seems a little too easy, right? But we're also watching that madness of Eliazaris, because he's just not all there, right? After all the shit that he's been through, all the stuff that he's seen, he knows the consult's real, the shit with the commune, Kellis, he's kind of scared. So really they've taken this fucking scorched earth approach to their attack on Shimeh, and it's a firefight, and it's amazing to watch. I especially liked when the Kisharim finally do come out to play, and we're just watching, these fucking fiery displays of magic, wards being attacked or resummoned into place, that. All that is so fucking cool. And then of course, man, we got the Men of the Tusk hacking and slacking, man. Just it is a bloody mess. We got Proyas in the siege tower, the two twin siege towers. We see the one get lit up and everything. Man, Proyas has that whole moment too, right? He is watching, this holy city. What the whole reason why the holy war was to get Shimeh, not to destroy it. And he's watching the heathen sorcerers burn it down to the ground. And we're watching that test of faith, I feel again here on that assault of Shimeh with Proyas, especially that moment where he throws his Kore, you know what I mean? I feel his head is in all kinds of, different directions, but he uses his Kore to kill that Kisharim sorcerer. Oh man, you know what I mean? We got a commune when he, he sleeps with Esmenet, but then we're they kind of roll out of that thing, and he realizes that Akiri Confis, and he's got his whole crew. What is it? The Kindra Hill? Oh god, I can't remember, but he's got that whole force, and they're about ready to fucking attack, and we get a commune versus that whole army, and that is badass, right? A commune is just a gangster with the sorcery, and man, oh man. Going off of that too, the great names are here. You know what I mean? Like, the one that was like kind of a little heartbreaking for me was Gotian. When Gotian takes the fucking arrow in the armpit, that was sad for me, man. I liked Gotian. You know what I mean? I understand that these guys are fucking religious like nut jobs when you really boil it down, but I really liked Gotian. I liked him on the plains of Mangetta. I always got a little inspired by Gotian. You know what I mean? The guy leading these Shriel Knights, man. Yeah, man. Shimeh was exciting and heartbreaking. Because we spent all this time with these people, right? And we're just watching them. We're watching them die, or we're watching their minds just being broken by what they're witnessing. It's intense to say the least, right? But then we also get to see fucking, what is it? The Sifrang? Is it a Sifrang? The demon thing that Ayakis summons? Jesus Christ. Bakker pulled out all the stops here in Shimeh, right? I'm sure I'm forgetting quite a few things, guys, but I mean, come on, let's face it. That battle was fucking bonkers. It is a bit disorientating and confusing with the perspective jumps, but personally, I feel like that added to the feel because, man, wouldn't this battle be disorientating and confusing as all fuck? So I do feel like that really just added to the authenticity of the feeling of this crazy assault on Shimeh. I guess I should not forget to add that we watched Confis get beheaded by Saban, right? And for me, I was like, why couldn't have Gotian beheaded him? And I honestly, though, too, I wasn't sure if it was actually Akiri Confis that died or if it was Saban, because it just says he saw the blade that took his head. I was like, whose head? Whose head? Because I wasn't so sure that the new god of men could be killed. But either way, we see that. Then we get that whole scene where Kellis enters the fray. He's attacking the Kisharim and they're attacking him. And it almost looks like he's about to be overwhelmed. And then there's that moment, right? The bright flash. And it's everything's over and they've won. Yeah. So I want to get into this ending because my camera is about to die. So let's get into it. So this is one of the most gangster awesome moments of this whole trilogy, the book, whatever. And honestly, I might not have really dug this ending years ago. In fact, I'm almost positive I wouldn't have. But today, the guy I am now, the reader I am now, I loved this. I loved Akamyan's entrance, and you got all the great names, or what's going to be the new great names. It's a new world now, right? They've won, and he approaches Kellis, and we see Akamyan just renounce everyone and everything, and it's such a badass moment for Akamyan, really. You know what? He's just I renounce my school, and I renounce my wife, I renounce my prophet. It's super gangster. It's a mic drop moment for Akamyan, really, because at this moment, man, he could have easily just reaped the benefits, right, of being Kellis's teacher and kind of right hand man in some ways, but he says no, and walks away from the warrior prophet. So gangster, and it really Drusus Akamyan's stock went way up. It's skyrocketed in my book, and I cannot wait to find out what Drusus Akamyan is up to in the Aspect Emperor, as well as the rest of this, the surviving cast and crew here. I don't know who's going to go over, but goddamn, I'm excited. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed some of this because it was kind of a nightmare to do. It's a very hard book of the three to cover. So much going on, crazy concepts. My mind has been bent in every which way, shape, or form. So yeah. But also, like I said in the beginning, guys, I encourage you highly to jump in those comments and light that section up, man. Let's talk about this stuff, because some stuff I don't feel like I'm so clear on, but I still am going to be championing the fuck out of this series. So, let's talk about it, all right? All right. So as always, guys, if you're new, please like and subscribe. It really helps grow the channel. You know what time it is.